Hi, it's Elliott. Hope you're doing well. Before I begin this video and you'd like to use OCD Recovery's coaching services, please reach out to Phil at ocdrecovery.com and he will get back to you as quick as he can. Yeah, so today, guys, I wanted to speak about subtle internal compulsions. Now, when on the recovery journey, we're going to have some physical outward compulsions. You know, you're performing that physical action in response to that urge or intrusive thought just to try and offset that in order to get that relief. Then there's also going to be so many subtle internal compulsions that are keeping things fueled up, right? And what tends to happen is, as those physical compulsions are still there, those internal compulsions are going to be sort of self-reinforced by those physical compulsions, right? So it's so important that where possible you target the low-hanging fruit in your journeys to OCD recovery, right? So your main compulsions, as you really target that internal framework for those subtle internal compulsions to flourish does start to die down. But having said that, even after I got overcame my main compulsions, I was still left with these subtle, sneaky ones that were keeping me stuck, right? So any internal compulsions can look like many different things. So it might be neutralizing a thought, it might be rethinking a thought, it might be internal testing in the mind, it might be that forcing of the feeling that you're trying to experience. It might just be that proactive double checking, solving a math problem type scenario where you're looking at a situation from the past. Maybe there's something in your environment and your mind sort of pulls you in that direction, and you're just trying to fix and solve in the moment. It's almost like you're doing a puzzle or a math problem in your head in the moment, and you're trying to produce that internal state that is congruent with your feelings of recovery and feeling good and feeling the way that you want to feel. All right, and it's that constant internal chase to get to that by doing that figuring out in your head, right? And that process can be going on for a long period of time. And I think for me, that was very much, like I said, that was very much the last thing for me to go. After the main physical compulsions, I was still left with these sneaky ones. Even other things as well, like shaking my head if I had an intrusive thought, or like a knee-jerk reaction like that, or closing my eyes, or, just any sort of subtle head jerks as well, just trying to offset and alleviate the discomfort, almost as like a self-reassurance mechanism to say, no, you don't want that. Maybe an intrusive thought came into my head and I'd sort of try and reinforce that I didn't want that by shaking the head, or all those other things that I explained. And of course they can feel automatic sometimes as well. I'm not saying you're just going to be able to stop those internal compulsions, but what you have to realize is that they still do have an important say in the recovery journey. So it's so important that where possible you do try and take those seriously. If you stop your main compulsions and you think, oh right, I'm out of the woods now because I've stopped them, no, more than likely you're going to be left behind with these little subtle ones that you need to address. And when you're left with these subtle internal compulsions, it just shows where that deeper level of acceptance is needed. In my case, for example, I remember, even though I stopped my main physical outward compulsions of watching adult content, I was still doing that internal forcing in my head, testing my levels of attractiveness to the same people, testing my levels of attractiveness to the opposite people. And it was that internal thermometer that was constantly going on. And until I really chipped away at the belief systems there, that internal framework kept on, staying alight in my mind, right? It kept on going, it kept on having that momentum. So I had to really go a bit deeper with the perspectives there. So what was I scared of? It was more than likely the fear of rejection, the fear of not being happy, the fear of not feeling the way that I wanted to feel, the fear of being stuck forever. And yeah, that took a lot of time to really sort of try and bring that down. And it's funny, like in the moment when you're doing these subtle internal compulsions, you think that they're not going to have much of an impact, right? But trust me, they do. You're not going to be recovering if you're doing any internal compulsions. In recovery, there's no internal forcing, there's no being proactive. It's just that release. It's just the absence of. So if you're proactively trying to create, that certainty or that feeling that you want in your mind, then it kind of shows you where you need to stop doing that, because OCD thrives off certainty. And any chase for certainty, especially in the form of internal compulsions, or as a sort of self-reassurance thing to say that you don't want to do that, you're reinforcing to the brain that this thing is important, and OCD is just going to stay fueled up, right? So there could be so many subtle internal compulsions that you're doing across the journey. So like in my sense, with HOCD, was trying to find those find those feelings of attractiveness, whether, maybe in ROCD, you're with your partner and you're scanning their appearance, saying, oh, what do I like about them? Do I find that attractive about them? How do I feel towards them? Maybe in like a magic thinking OCD, you're trying to work out like the repercussions of your actions as you do it. Maybe in a harm OCD, you're trying to like test in your mind. When you're holding a knife in the kitchen and you're preparing dinner, you might be sort of testing in your mind how you feel about holding that knife when there's somebody else in the kitchen with you. There's so many different variations of that, but it's that internal trying to fix, trying to solve, trying to work out, trying to produce that final answer. All right, so there will be, like I said, there will be a lot of that going on, especially as your recovery journey goes on, especially as you cut out the main compulsions and avoidance behaviors. There's still going to be like the remnants and the after effects in many ways of those. So yeah, that's why you need to keep chipping away at those irrational beliefs and fears. Don't get complacent when you think you've done the main bit of the recovery journey in terms of cutting compulsions and main avoidance behaviors. No, I can tell you that if there are some subtle compulsions going on, then you're not going to reach that full level or full robust level of recovery, right? So yeah, you need to take them seriously. Any way in which you're trying to produce control, certainty or comfort, that can give you a good indication as to whether you're still engaging in these internal compulsions. Anything you're trying to fix, you're trying to solve. Maybe in a contamination OCD, you're trying to trace the trail of the contamination. Who have I contaminated? When I touched the cat, where did those germs go after that? Did they go to my mum? If they go to my mum, are they going to go to my brother or sister? All those sorts of things. So like I said, try not to engage in that problem solving and trying to obtain that answer as you want, because we never need an answer. OCD recovery isn't having an answer. OCD recovery isn't having certainty. It's being okay with the uncertainty. It's cushioning the blow of the worst case scenario, so we can really try and absorb and stay in that uncertainty with a lot more efficiency, and we're not so dismally concerned about not having that certainty, and we're not so dismally concerned about living in that no man's land, which it often feels like with OCD. All right, so yeah, very important to remember the subtle compulsions also matter.